Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephen McCrocklin, and I'm so glad you've had a chance to join us this afternoon. Those were some teaser trails that I thought you would enjoy about literacy and reading in general. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Stephen McCrocklin, and I am the executive director and co-founder at Langsford We Teach Reading. Our team has spent over 30 years helping kids become confident readers. This is especially important work to me because I was a student who struggled learning to read. I'm also the parent of a child who has dyslexia, and now I get to lead a learning center where the mission is to help kids so that they don't have to go through what I went through. So, again, very important work to me. Um, at the end of today, after the core of what I want to talk about, I actually have some bonus items for you that I think you'll find especially interesting. And I will also leave a few minutes at the end in case you have questions. So let's go ahead and jump in. Um, and, and the right idea to understand about reading is that there is a success sequence to learning to read. People who become confident, skilled readers follow a similar trajectory. So there is a strategy or keys to successfully building a confident reader. And throughout this, remember that confidence is based on competence. So to get confidence in something, you need to be competent. So what I'd like you to do is take 30 seconds or so, and I'd like you to read what's up on the screen now to yourself. I'll give you just a couple minutes or 30 seconds or so to do that, and I'll check back in with you. That's one of my favorite books. That's out of the book Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. While you were reading that, your brain was doing something that was completely amazing. Your eyes scanned across that screen in short, jerking movements. 4 to 5 times a second, your eyes stopped just long enough to recognize one or two words. Of course, we never realized that the information was coming into our brain in that sort of jerky form. It was really only the sounds and the meaning of the words that reach your conscious mind. But those black marks on the white screen projected on your retina can evoke an entire universe. It's such a joy to watch those two babies communicate. It's just important to understand that speaking is natural, that our brains are pre-wired to do that and to communicate in that way. And it happens without any particular instruction, meaning that you don't have to go to school to learn that.
The neighbors standing on their porch with their eyes closed, smelling the sky. They took deep breaths of air like they were trying to eat the smell. The end.
No, notice how much energy this young man had to put into reading. Certainly not as immediately joyful as it was with the talking babies. So, why is that so different? Why is that so effortful, yet the speaking piece wasn't? What's involved then in learning to read? For one, it's an acquired ability, meaning it's a cultural invention. We're not pre wired for reading like we are speech. It must be taught. And that there is no, so meaning like there's no particular part of our brain that was designed for us to take language in through vision, which is what we're doing when we read. And so even when you learn to do this, it takes years of work to run smoothly enough so that we can forget we're even doing it. The science of reading is very clear about how this all happens. We know a whole lot about how kids learn to read. In fact, it turns out that all over the world, the same brain regions activate to read words. And this tells us then that good readers go about learning to read in the same way, not uniquely different ways. So that means then that there is a path to develop confident readers. So then what's the path? Well, it turns out that there are actually 5 key steps that must be in place for a reader to launch. I'll show them to you on a video.
Yeah, we're talking about the 5 basic fundamentals of
Tell me if
reading.
you can hear that.
And Stephen, what are we talking
Raise your
about?
hand or shake.
5 basic building blocks to reading.
Okay.
Phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension.
And we got actually different sections here. Right now, they're working on what part?
We're working on phonemic awareness, and what that is the awareness of sounds. That before reading really starts, you have to be able to appreciate that there are 44 sounds in our spoken language.
And so she's mixing up different sounds together, even if they're nonsense words. She has to figure out, what the next sound is.
Exactly. What's the identity of that sound, and what sequence does that sound come in?
And then we go on to the next section here. What are we doing?
Well, with 44 sounds, we've got to transition to letters, and there are 26 alphabet letters. So phonics goes about mapping those sounds to letters. Now, you can automatically realize that we don't have enough letters to match all the sounds. So those letters need to combine in certain ways in order to represent all the sounds we need to read.
Practice, practice, practice. And then right here, we're doing a little practicing with the fluency.
That's right. So now that you can sound out a word, one needs to get fluent enough to start beginning to get meaning out. So fluency practice gives us specific ways to build the speed and competency in reading.
And you were saying silent reading doesn't work so well. Reading out loud
That's right.
helps you with that flow.
That's right. Reading aloud with guidance and feedback is how you really build that fluency. And then the whole reason we read is to get meaning from print. First step in that is vocabulary. And so it's one thing to read along in a book, but when you come across a word you don't know, it becomes really important to take the time to learn that word. And so that's best done by putting words on cards and practicing. And then on cards, if you can see at Ellie there in the back, she's got a picture.
Ellie, what we got? What's the word?
Lament.
Lament. Oh, and it's a little picture of someone crying. So if you're lamenting, you're crying, you're sad.
Very sad.
You're
expressing sorrow.
very sad, expressing sorrow. I'll take that because I'm going to use that later in a phrase later on today. And then right over here, pictures and words going together.
Exactly. So now that you can read across that page, you know what all the individual words mean. The whole goal next, to bring it to life, to bring it real, is to imagine the story in your mind's eye. See the movie.
And then building a movie from textbooks like biology books, a little trickier than just a novel.
It is, and that's what Ethan's working on there now. And you know that old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. The whole adage of comprehension is to take those 1,000 words and get your own picture.
And you know what? It comes to this moment in the show for us that I am going to lament and feel sad that we're going to leave you guys because we've learned all we need to learn this morning. But no, it's an ongoing thing that the building, reading, and comprehension, practice, practice, practice. And that's what it is. Oh, I want to.
So you're right. So 5 key steps. Those 5 key steps are each of which are in a sequence and each are necessary. One that you may be new to you is phonemic awareness, and that's not to be confused with phonics. Phonemic awareness is a deep language skill. It's the awareness that words are built from separate and distinct sounds. And a successful reader is able to discriminate each of those sounds, even when they come together and fold in together to make a word. So for example, if I say a word like plant, I have the ability to take that word, pull it apart into each individual sound and go p, o, a, n, t, and I can all merge it back together. That's what phonemic awareness is. If letters are present, it's not phonemic awareness, that's phonics. And traditionally, very little instruction happens at this level of phonemic awareness. And in fact, very few teachers and very few educational programs really offer instruction in that area. So as we talked about those 5 key steps to reading success, phonemic awareness, that fundamental basic one that you see, is one that's often missed, and that is separate and distinct from phonics. Without each of these steps, a child can't become a confident reader. You need all 5. Even if just one area is weak, it will get in the way of a reader becoming confident. One question that's often asked is, how much should your child read? One of the best ways to answer this is looking at 2 different students. One student, James, reads about 20 minutes a night. The other, Travis, reads only about 4 minutes a night and sometimes not at all. Let's see how that plays out over 1 week, a month, a year, even by the end of 8th grade. So in 1 week, James has read about 100 minutes, where Travis has read 20. In 1 month, that's 400 minutes versus 80. 1 school year, 3,600 minutes compared to 720. And by the end of 8th grade, 28,800 minutes versus 5,760. So if you look at just that difference of just 20 minutes a day, who do you think by the end of 8th grade is going to be the better reader? Who's going to know more? Who's going to write better? Who's going to have the better vocabulary? Who's going to feel more successful in school? And yes, who is going to be the more confident reader? So those 5 key steps have to be in place, each one of them, and they need to be practiced to automaticity. And then the whole reading process starts to all gel together into this confident reader who's launched in their literacy and setting themselves up for success in life. If you think that there's a problem in this launch, in one of these areas, or that something's not coming along, it's very important to identify as early as possible if something's not coming along, so that that student can get help soon. So the green line on this graph illustrates James, the successful reader. As he continues to read, he becomes better and better at reading, and more confident, and more successful in his pursuits. Where Travis, the weaker reader, one needs to really start understanding, why is he not progressing? What's notable here is you can see that by the end of 3rd grade, how large that gap is. But when you back that down, even to the beginning of 1st, you can already see that this split in their trajectory happened very early on. It's subtle, but it's very much there. So we really want to intervene and support a child as soon as possible. Kids who struggle rarely outgrow their difficulties, and that's what you can see here. So the question is, what are the signs you're looking for? What will tell you that your child is having gaps early on? They're going to play out to become later difficulties. Well, I have a document here that I'm happy to send you. If you send an email to info@WeTeachReading, I'd be happy to send this on to you. But let me hit the highlights. Some early signs that launch is not happening well includes not liking to read aloud, that they avoid this. When they read, they skip over or add in small words that aren't there. They choose to read simpler books, or if they're younger, they'll just want to read the same one over and over. When it comes to a new word that they haven't seen before, they have difficulty sounding it out. Often kids who are not on a successful launch will be what we call Friday spellers. And those are students who can memorize the words for a Friday spelling test, but then later they forget them. And when they write, they tend to use simpler words than their vocabulary because they don't know how to spell them. So those are just a few of the things that indicate that launch in reading isn't coming along like it needs to be successful long run. I told you at the beginning I'd give you some bonus items. I've covered the core of what I wanted, but I want to cover a couple bonus or a few bonus items that parents often ask. One is we often hear that they don't really know how to choose books for their kids. So here's what to look for in books according to kids themselves. Overwhelmingly, most kids want to read books that make them laugh. About half of kids want books that activate their imagination, that tell a made-up story, and have characters they wish they could be, that are strong or smart or brave or someone that they can really connect with in terms of how they want to see themselves. Many say they want to learn something and have a mystery or problem to solve. So those are starting points. 73% of kids say that they would read more if they could just find books they like. So that, as much as it's very important that they have the tools to read, we need to match that with books of interest that pull them in. Bonus item number 2. Does it matter if my child reads a paper book or an ebook? Well, in short, printed books are better for learning. I'm going to read you the conclusions of some research studies that have been done in that area. A sample of middle school students given ebooks retained less information about what they read compared to students given the same information in print. While they were much more motivated to read the ebook, they were also less able to retell the story. Students who read text in print scored significantly better on tests of reading comprehension than students who read digitally. And studies with university students in several countries confirmed what I bet you probably already know, and that is when reading either for school or pleasure, overwhelmingly, the majority of students found it easiest to concentrate when reading in print. They reported that multitasking almost 3 times as much when they were reading on screen compared to hard copy. So the data right now is pretty heavily weighted toward, if you need to read something to understand it, you're really best reading it in print. Bonus item number 3, and this piggybacks right to bonus item number 2, and that is audiobooks. Does it matter whether I'm reading the book or listening to the book? I'm also hearing that talked now about ear reading. So we're reading a book as eye reading, listening to the book I'm hearing as ear reading. Well, here's the deal. Audiobooks should be your last resort. They're ultimately not a substitute for reading with your eyes. About 10 to 15% of eye movement during reading is actually regressive, meaning that your eyes are going back, rechecking. If you're reading, it's pretty easy to go back and do that, find the point at which either you zoned out or you just want to recheck something or look at a name again. Or frankly, even stop and pause and put your thoughts together. With print, that's easier to slow down and speed up all within the same paragraph. It's not so easy to do any of those things if you're listening. Students who listen to a podcast lesson, so this is a school test, school sort of experiment, research project. A group of students listened to a podcast performed worse compared on a comprehension test compared to a student who read the same lesson on paper. And what's interesting is the podcast group did a lot worse, not just a little worse, a lot. The listeners scored an average of 28% lower on the quiz. And that's a difference between an A and a D. So there's structural hurdles that you can't overcome easily if you're listening. For one, you can't underline, make a note in the margin, or highlight easily. You miss, when you're listening to something on audio and not reading it, you miss clues like something being bolded or italicized or a header. It's also slow. Skilled readers read much, much faster than you can listen. So people listening to books often multitask, which kills comprehension. It is one thing to listen to a book while I'm, mowing my yard or cleaning my house or doing driving. but I'm not going to listen to anything that's important for my work or something that I'm really going to take a test on. It's not a substitute for reading. And this goes to that whole piece in the science of reading, that learning to read is truly a brain upgrade. And the scientists who study reading talk about it really as a cognitive enhancement. So learning to be a skilled reader cannot be substituted with equally with an audiobook. One last bonus item. Brains need sleep. So this is the back to school kickoff webinar, and we're all watching kids convert from the summer schedule to the back to school schedule. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the importance that our brain, the importance to sleep, of sleep for our brain. So kids between 6 and 13, that's about 9 to 11 hours of sleep a night. And so much happens during sleep that's important. And we really just can't trim that time off and expect to still have a fully functioning brain. Also, remember that the blue light from screens tell our brain not to sleep. So it really can wreck a sleep schedule. And the rule of thumb right now is not to have screen time about 2 hours before bed. Now, I know that's a lot, but I wanted to point it out and just, kind of do your best as you can in that transition. Finally, I'm also want to point you toward a booklet or a pamphlet that you can download yourself that has 9 simple ways to boost your child's confidence in reading. And those are different ones than what I've talked about today. So the best way to get that is to go to the website at weteachreading.com, scroll down, and you'll see a link come up that allows you to get to that, and you can download it immediately. We've gotten a lot of really great feedback. I think you'll like it. Upcoming webinars that I have coming forward: Thursday, September 28th, Reading Transformed. And this is sort of the inner workings of how Langsford works with kids to help them become confident, lifelong readers and learners. And it really, really kind of opened the hood to what we do, talk about it, and we'll give you some really solid tips along the way there as well. So that's coming up Thursday, September 28th. And then in October, we'll be doing a presentation on dyslexia. It's really the cutting edge understanding of what's going on in dyslexia. We know dyslexia and the science of reading, and we're much farther beyond just dyslexia as a proxy for what we once believed were kids who had difficulties with letter reversals. And we actually understand that that's not the case at all for kids who have dyslexia. It's much more specific than that. I'll walk you through what it is, what effective remediation looks like, so you can look for that coming up in December. If you are just learning about Langsford and want to explore more, we are happy to meet you, explore what it is that your needs are, and you can do that in multiple ways. You can do that on our website at weteachreading.com. You can schedule a free consultation with a reading specialist. If you already know something's going on and want to explore an evaluation to really pinpoint your students' strengths and weaknesses, you can do that real easily, again, at weteachreading.com. You can schedule an assessment, you can get a customized plan, and get your young or even not so young student launched into confident reading. I have a few minutes, about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm happy if you'd like to answer any questions that you might have. So feel free to unmute. Everyone did get muted as they came in, but if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute, and I'm happy to answer them for you.
Hey, Stephen, my name is Zahir, and I've had 2 of my kids just complete your program. They've done the reading and the writing assessment. In fact, one has yet to complete second assessment after the program. But they started the program at the age of 12 and the age of 14. Now, you were 100% correct when you spoke about the phonetic awareness versus phonics and that differences. And that was something that my wife and I were well aware of going into the schooling system. So we spent a lot of time doing that, but I still feel on some areas we missed it. We could have done a better job. She and I are scientists, we're not educators. So that was some of the problems that we had. But so with that background, the questions I have for you is, with this age and them coming in, obviously we're just fresh out of the program. What is the science saying about the later intervention? Because the one thing that kind of caught my eye was the age groups you were referring to were very young. You were talking about kids up to third grade, where you can see this difference. You had another slide in there that spoke about 6 to 17-year-olds, so that's covered in that ambit. But what I wanted to find out is, if you start this late in the program, like 12, 14 years old, what sort of results are you seeing with those? Are there any long-term studies that show any sort of improvement? Was it a bit too late? Are there some deficiencies that are ingrained, wired into the brain that's going to practically be impossible to try and straighten out moving forward?
So if we break the reading process, so yes and no is the most direct answer. So let me unpack that. So we know that and not just at Langsford with the students that we've seen and tracked over years, but the large scale studies that have been done, we know we can guide kids to become independent readers, meaning their ability to break the alphabetic code, come to a word they haven't seen before, sound it out, and read it. We know that those are very teachable well into advanced age. And we've worked with students well into their 60s and early 70s and seen that play out. So that's a pretty teachable piece, regardless of age. So that's not age dependent. What we do find is the older someone is when they start working fluency, the harder fought that can be. There are tests that give us insight into what that looks like. So there are tests of what are called rapid automatic or rapid serial naming, or rapid automatic naming, that can give us some insight into sort of a person's internal hardwired tempo for reading. And that can be measured, and we can actually talk offline about your specific boys or children, and I can speak specifically about that. But what we talk about in the research in general for populations, not an individual, is that the later they start that, the harder it is to catch up because of what we call a practice deficit. So if a student joins the basketball team in 6th grade and everyone else has been playing since kindergarten, when they walk on the floor, they just will not have had the years of practice that those other students will have had. So even if you cover the basics of ball skill, ball handling, and all these other things, they're just not going to look like the student who's been playing for 6 years. So if you figure a good reader is reading 1 million or more words a year, and a less good reader is not, that just leaves a gap. So we know that fluency gets better and better the more a student reads. But if we look at, can we catch them all the way up to their peers, the amount of words that they would need to read per day is more than what most pre-adolescent kids are going to be interested in doing. So that's why I said yes and no. We can train up the decoding system, make them solid, accurate readers, but they are at risk for remaining less fluent and a little slower. So the remedy for that is often, if that's the case for that student, is to get extended time. They just need a little more time. Maybe they need 30 seconds or a minute longer to get to the bottom of the page. So it's easily remedied with some basic accommodations.
Okay, right. And that's great. Yeah, we look forward to the reassessments and the feedback. Your team has been awesome. We really enjoyed it, and enjoyed today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you joining, and I'm always available if you have questions. My email is Stephen@weteachreading.com, and always feel free to reach out to me.
Sure. Thank you, Stephen.
I think there are a couple more folks on here. If anyone else has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And otherwise, we'll cut you loose and call it a day. But anyone else have anything? Okay. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.